Hello and welcome to this Pariah Nexus Mission Deck review. Today we're going to be taking a look at the brand new mission pack for Warhammer 40k 10th edition. We're going to look at the changes from the previous mission deck, the implications that this has on the game of Warhammer 40k, and also our thoughts on what Warhammer 40k is going to look like from now on, because this has got some massive changes, hasn't it, Michael?
It has, Jordan. This is a new era of 40k, and we've all been waiting a long time for this. It's been almost a year since we've had new missions, and this is very, very excited, and I can't wait to dive in.
And obviously a massive thank you to Games Workshop for providing us with the Pariah Nexus Mission Deck for us to be able to bring you this review today. Michael, what are some of the most significant changes from the previous card deck to the new one?
Okay, Jordan, a lot has changed. We've got a couple of new deployments. We've got a whole set of new missions, primary missions. There's new mission rules. There's lots of things to do with battle line, which we'll explore further shortly. And of course, secondaries. We've got a lot of new secondaries as well. So the game is going to be completely refreshed, I would say, with this mission pack.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, a lot of us have been screaming for that refresh of 40k. We've loved 10th edition so far, but actually some of these changes are really positive for the game, I think. So first of all, let's talk about the actual booklet for the game itself. What changes have we got here?
Okay, so usually there's a lot of hidden rules in this booklet. I've been asked a lot of questions about 40k, obviously, over my time at VT, and I usually direct people to this booklet. A lot of the stages have stayed the same. So steps 1 to 7, now the game is divided into those steps. We do have some changes, okay? So how you pick tactical and fixed is very slightly tweaked now. You just write down what you want to take, which is what we're all doing anyway. But more importantly, tactical still runs pretty much the same. You still get a CP when you discard one.
Brilliant.
However, the new orders stratagem is not limited to one use only per game.
This is going to change a lot of things, I think, in the game. Because obviously that once per game, you had to use it, that critical moment, whereas now you get 5 opportunities to go, actually, I need to score this turn, so I'm going to use one of my precious CP to get rid of that card.
Yeah, and with 18 cards per secondary deck now, you've got even more reason to use it. So that's one of the big changes. Following on from that, we've got sort of the deployment steps. When you deploy Titanic models now, they essentially count as like 2 drops. So if you deploy your Titanic model, your opponent then deploys 2 of their units. Okay,
so what's the implications here for the game? Like, I know it's quite a... It's a weird change, actually.
It is weird, but I think it rewards you for taking Titanic. It's a bit more of a, when you place a Titanic model normally, your opponent now gets to just deploy it to counter it. Whereas now when you deploy a Titanic model, they have to put 2 of their units down. So it's less of a punishment for taking 1 or multiple Titanic models.
So do you think we're going to see, like, Imperial Knights are obviously the biggest, Imperial Knights, Chaos Knights, they're like the biggest benefactors for this, right? Do you think we're going to see more big knights on the table because of this change?
I don't think so. I think this change is a nice to have, but it doesn't have any major implications. It doesn't really bring Titanic back into the game.
Right, okay, awesome.
But it's a nice change. It's a nice change. We've got a new step in the pack, and this is the redeploy unit step.
Okay, so I think maybe at the start of 10th edition, we didn't have that many redeploys. With codexes coming out and things like that, redeploys have become very common.
Yeah.
And there's multiple versions of this, right?
That's right, yes. So anything that just says you redeploy your units after both players have deployed now fits into this step, step 10, okay, which is after the deploy unit step, but is before the resolve battle abilities and beginning the battle steps, okay? But it does say that you resolve them in this step unless stated otherwise.
Okay, so that means that if you have one that says you can redeploy after you know who's going first or after the first turn begins, you can still do that after the first turn rather than in this step.
Exactly, exactly. So those are still mega powerful abilities, but it's really nice to just have it fully clarified in the mission pack as it is now. And then the rest of the steps are kind of as you'd expect. So you've got your pre-battle abilities.
Scouts.
You've got your, scouts, exactly. And then you've got your beginning the battle and so on and so on.
Okay, brilliant. So there's a few little changes here. Obviously, glad to see that redeploy has actually got its own step now. That's a good little change.
As a wargamer, you're going to know how important dice are to the game. You're going to know the memories that they create, whether they're good, the bad, the 6s, the 1s. The most important thing is having quality memories with your friends. And it goes even further when you've got dice that match the theme of your army. Whether you play Ultramarines, Necrons, Orcs, Chaos Marines, it really doesn't matter. And the dice are a massive aspect of that. And it's my pleasure to announce our sponsor, the Baron of Dice. Check out the link in our description or go to www.baronofdice.com.
But there has been one like redesign, right? In terms of we're no longer having gambits.
No gambits.
We've got secret missions.
Secret missions, and so there's no gambit deck in there. There is a secret mission deck, and that's 4 cards per player, and each of these cards describes what you need to do. Now, to do a secret mission, it needs to be at the end of the 3rd battle round, and you can opt to do a secret mission. You pick one of the cards from the secret mission deck.
Okay.
And then you hide it. Obviously, it's secret. So you place it face down to the side. Okay.
Right.
And then you can only pick a secret mission if you are either equal to or less than your opponent's primary at the end of battle round 3.
Okay, right. So that's a good little thing there. Rather than obviously saying, right, I've got like 30 points, I'm just going to do a secret mission and max out my primary. Yeah. Okay, that's a nice little change there.
In addition, you're capped at a maximum of 20 from the primary mission card.
So let's say you had 18 points beforehand. That's what you scored on your primary already. Turn 3 comes, you use your secret mission. Does that then replace, if you obviously do your secret mission by the end of the battle, does that replace the 18 you scored, or does it add on top of the 20 that you would score?
So it adds on top of the 20 that you would score. And if there is primary missions in effect, they're still in effect for the capping of the 20. So if you're on 18, you could still score another 2 points from the primary mission.
Right.
Even if you've got a secret mission in play.
Okay, right, brilliant, makes sense.
Okay, fantastic. Obviously, both players could potentially do a secret mission if you're both on equal primary points.
Right,
which would be very funny.
Yeah.
But it's safe to say that the secret missions are a lot more viable now compared to gambits. I think we actually will see them in play.
This was what I was going to ask you, was do you think we'll see them? Because the issue we had with gambits was they were next to impossible to actually complete, as seen on some of our live streams with Steve. But I do think that actually having missions that you can achieve will hopefully reward you a little bit more for taking these things, right?
Yes, you will see secret missions now.
Okay.
You will see them. There are some that seem very achievable, and I think it's going to be a nuance in the game to recognise what secret mission your opponent's trying to do, and equally try and bluff and maybe send, because there's one that involves like battle line and deployment zones. There's one that involves your warlord getting into their objective marker.
So you don't want to make it too obvious. You just have your warlord sprinting
exactly. Or you do sprint your warlord across, but it's actually this little battle line unit that is going to score you your secret mission.
Ah, I see. Okay, right, yeah. So there's going to be a new element added to 40k, which is interesting, right?
Yeah, it's very exciting. It's very exciting. I can't wait to try some secret missions. Actions.
So the thing that we all were doing, but it wasn't actually a thing, we just said we were doing the action.
Yes. So those of you that have played before 10th will remember actions were a thing. They pretty much are the same as they are now. So we now, any ability that requires you to be eligible to shoot and score cards or anything like that is now considered an action.
Yep.
However, the restrictions are quite heavy on who can actually do an action, and this is game changing.
Massive. Like genuinely will change a lot of lists out there.
Yes. So let's start off with the restrictions. Okay, you cannot be aircraft.
That makes sense.
Cool, that does make sense. No longer having an aeroplane drop a teleport home or anything.
Yeah.
You cannot be battle shocked. That hasn't changed.
Okay, cool.
And that's fair.
That makes sense.
You cannot have an OC characteristic of 0.
Well, Nurglin's just lost all their stock. Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
And of course, if you can reduce someone's OC to 0 via an ability, it would also stop them from being able to do an action.
Yeah, no, honestly, that is a massive change. And I think a lot, like, again, it's going to impact certain factions which were relying on these OC0 units. Tyranids mainly, right? With like their spore mines and things like that. It's going to stop interactions like that in the game.
Yes. And why has this changed? Well, I mean, let's be honest. An OC0 model is OC0 because it doesn't have the brain capacity to score objectives.
Don't you dare upset my Nurgles like that.
So therefore, they're not going to have the capacity to do actions. So it makes a lot of sense from a lore perspective, but it's also a good game balancer.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel right when your spore mines are scoring you points in a mission.
A spore mine just deploying a teleport homer or something like that, right?
A Nurgling's not going to listen to you and deploy a teleport homer for you.
They end up just throwing it behind them or just having like a laugh with it or something.
Wolfen are too crazy
to
try and do actions.
Sure.
So it's a great change. but it is obviously going to affect the power level and potentially win rates of certain factions. So we'll have to look at that in more detail as time goes on. So the next restriction is that you cannot be in engagement range of an enemy unit.
So pistol basically doesn't allow you to deploy a teleport homer or things like that.
That's right. Big guns never tire. So these now will not affect your ability to do missions. So if you have war gear where you're like, oh, I'll put one pistol in there just so that I'm able to shoot. A great example is Termagants with Spine Fist because it's pistol. So taking those to be able to do missions while you're in combat was great. Doesn't work anymore. Okay, big change. Next one, pretty much the same kind of thing. If you advanced or fell back, you cannot do an action.
So that's stopping things with like assault from doing actions and things like that, right?
Yes, and the important thing here is that being eligible to shoot does not affect your ability to do an action.
Yes.
Doing actions is now based on what you haven't done.
Yeah.
So even if you've got a rule on your data sheet that says you're eligible to shoot after advancing or falling back, that doesn't now unlock the ability to do an action. You quite literally are so restricted in this regard. In addition, if you are not eligible to shoot for any reasons whatsoever, maybe you've already shot, then you also can't be selected to do an action.
Right, okay. So a lot of massive implications to the game here with like assault and pistol, for instance, are the biggest things from what I can see. How do you think these are good changes for the game? Or do you think they were necessary for the game?
So this has been done both because it didn't quite feel right and it's very difficult to balance. You've got some armies where they might have a detachment that gives their entire army assault.
Yeah.
And some armies where they don't have access to assault or pistols. So demons could be a good example. There's not a huge amount of assault weapons in there, not a huge amount of pistols. So being able to balance that has been difficult. And so now we're just getting rid of the fact that having assault or pistol influences your ability to play the mission better than someone else. So that, I think, is the reason for the change. But what it does mean is that when you're building army lists, you actually now want to look a little bit more at units that have inherently high movement, units that can deep strike, even transports just to get you around the board.
Yeah.
And of course, transports themselves, because it's usually relatively cheap and it doesn't need to shoot or do combat.
The other question I have is, do these changes invalidate the special keywords like pistol and assault? Like, does it invalidate them? Do you even look to put them in lists anymore?
I think if you're looking for them just for missions, obviously it's not worth it.
Yeah.
But they're still fantastic. Being able to advance and shoot, giving you firing lines, having pistol, allowing you to do some damage in combat is really handy. I think pistol's probably the one that loses out the most. Big guns never tire. Most big things had guns anyway, so you kind of wanted to shoot with them. But pistols, usually you didn't want to shoot, so you were wanting to do mission stuff, but now you can't. So pistols is a big loser there. Right, Titanic characters. Okay. Now, in essence, so there's a bit of wording here, but a Titanic character can still shoot even though it's doing an action. So you can declare it to shoot and do an action.
Okay, so this is going to mean that Canis Rex, he was the first one that came to mind when you said this. He's going to be able to shoot all of his weapons and still perform cleanse or something like that.
Yes, yeah. So this does start to make Titanic a bit more interesting. We've already had one change with them, with the drops. Now we're seeing another one. Obviously, we weren't seeing Titanic models on the table very much.
No.
All of the big knights in Knights armies are characters. So it kind of gives them a bit more play.
Okay.
Those guys.
Yeah, sure. So it allows them to actually carry on. Effectively gives them old big guns never tire, right?
Yeah, in a way. Yeah.
Sure.
Exactly that. But do note that they can't charge. They still can't charge or anything.
Yeah.
Like that. All right, and then the final one. Now, this is a more subtle one, but it's one that us competitive Trixie players need to be aware of. Once you started an action, you cannot move for any other reasons beyond pile-ins and consolidates, or else the action cannot be completed anymore.
Okay.
So no reactive move if you started an action and it needs to be completed later. Now, there are cards in here that involve being on a certain area of the board and doing an action. Well, if your opponent moves near you, you can't reactive move away to try and protect the unit. You will have to take it. Otherwise, you're going to fail the action. In addition to this, of course, you can't use things like heroic intervention on units that are currently doing an action either. So just watch out for that. And obviously, if you can make your opponent trigger that, then you can make them fail an action. If they leave the board as well, then the action's failed. So if you've got a character like Celestine, who can stand back up after she's been destroyed, if she was doing an action at the time that she was destroyed, it is failed. because she's
Okay,
left the
but yeah,
board
that
and
makes
comes back.
sense. That does make sense.
So a few clarifications there, but I think it's all for the better of the game. But look, I sympathise. Anybody that's modelled weapons that have assault or weapons that have pistol, I do sympathise. I've got a lot myself. But we will have to adapt, and I think it's probably better for the balance of the game.
So I think, look, we could all expect massive changes. It's effectively, the way to look at it is this is 10th edition, like 1.2. Like this is the next phase of the game, right? And there was going to be some massive changes. And I think probably for the better, as you've just said.
Yeah. It's going to hurt initially, but I think it's going to be all right in the end.
The days of hiding who you are, being ashamed of your hobby, or the things that you're interested are well over. Which is why at Gambit Gaming, they've brought out a high quality cotton t-shirt, which is faction inspired, so no matter where you go, there is a t-shirt for every occasion. Whether it's getting ready to go to the coffee shop with your mates, checking out the local gaming store, or maybe heading out to a tournament, they'll have a faction inspired t-shirt perfect for you. Head over to www.gambitgaming.co.uk and pick up yours today.
Next, we've got to discuss deployment cards.
Yes.
We've got four of them have stayed the same, but we've got 2 new ones,
That's right.
which is actually 1 more than previously, right? Because we had 5 previously, whereas now we've got 6.
So sweeping engagement has changed. It's no longer the long triangles. It's kind of like Dawn of War, but it's like a step.
Okay, right.
And that's, I mean, it's interesting. This one, along with Tipping Point, the new one, which is a bit like Hammer and Anvil, but also a step, and the objectives aren't across the middle. But either one, they're kind of staggered.
Right.
They kind of look a bit like Crucible, but if you did it in right angles instead of a triangle.
Right, sure.
Anyway, so these ones, the deployment zones, sort of at the closest point, are actually less than 12 inches.
Yeah.
Or at 12 inches for some of them.
The big thing here, though, is depending on what the tournaments will be playing terrain like on these maps. It depends. Like, for instance, if you put a terrain piece right on the edge of that corner, combat armies are going to absolutely love that because they have a staging point right there to go.
Yeah.
Whereas I do think for the balance, potentially moving it back and keep giving a bit more space between the deployment line, right?
Yeah. I mean, combat armies, I think, could do with a bit of a hand anyway. And combat's always a little bit more interactive than shooting. So I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit of a skew towards.
I 100% would not mind, mate, but I was trying to be fair. But overall, do you think the new ones that we've seen and the changes, do you think we'll see them in mission packs for competitive play?
I think so. I think these 2 deployment zones do have a dynamic that is different to the rest of the ones we currently have. For example, the sweeping engagement, the new sweeping engagement, your deployment zone objective marker and the objective marker that's furthest from your deployment zone, but in no man's land, is actually a lot further away than the one that's closer to you on the other side of the board.
Okay.
So there's a lot of dynamics there for taking your opponent's home objective and playing across the board. So I do actually really like some of these new deployment zones,
Yeah, same. Again, it comes back to the whole thing of it's just refreshing the game, right? And I think that's going to be the general message for this video is it's nice to have just a brand new change and something different to play for 40k.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, we've got some new mission rules, quite a lot of new mission rules, actually. What are some of the most significant ones we've got, and which ones do you think we'll see competitively?
Adapt or die. This one's very cool. Okay, so if you're playing fixed, then once per game, you can actually swap out one of your fixed objectives for another one.
Okay, that's good.
So what this means is if you see an opponent's army and they've only got maybe 3 or 4 vehicles, you can go, I'll bring it down and, something else. And then halfway through, you're like, well, actually, I'm not going to be able to destroy these vehicles, I've realised. So I'm going to swap to, I don't know, Assassinate or Establish Locus, which is like a new version of Deploy Homer.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. If you're playing tactical, then up to twice per game, when you draw a card, you can draw another one and choose one of the 2 to keep.
Oh, okay, cool. Right, that's a really good little dynamic there. At least you get one for both sets of the game, right? I do think that actually the fixed is a really interesting one because if your opponent takes like 4 characters, you could just kill all 4 characters and go, right now, I know I only need 4 points, so I'm just going to pick Cleanse now for the last one and just do a really easy one for the end. So it actually That is a really good change for fixed, I think, and I like that a lot.
Would you like to see that at tournaments?
I would love to see that at tournaments. I think that actually adds a lot of dynamic play to the game and a lot of like interesting interactions of like, well, I'm only just going to take 4 characters now because I know that it's not going to entice people to take Assassinate. That does, in my opinion anyway. I would look at it like, I could do that.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I think it's going to help people who get sucked into taking fixed and then they immediately regret it and it kind of the game is over. It now is like they can sort of save themselves a little bit.
Definitely, definitely.
So next we've got hidden supplies, which is the setting up an extra marker. Hasn't changed.
Okay, brilliant.
So we'll move on.
Yeah.
Fog of War. So in the first battle round, everybody has cover and nobody can use core stratagems except new orders for regenerating cards.
Okay. So interesting.
Could be an interesting one on a terrain map that is very light, so that against shooting armies you have a bit more protection, or in a deployment zone that's quite wide, like Dawn of War or the new sweeping engagement.
Yeah.
The next one, inspired leadership. So if your warlord is out of your deployment zone and you've got a friendly unit within 9 inches invisible to that warlord, they get +1 to their battleship checks.
So first of all, I want to say I'm glad that the warlord actually has something that interacts with the game. Second of all, why does it have to be such a bad ability?
It would have been cool to have like an extra OC,
Yeah.
something really impactful.
+1 to battle shock. It would be great against Dread Talons or something, but that's it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a miss, that one.
Yeah.
But it's better than the minefields of previous versions.
It's just nice to see the warlord has something. I just wish it was impactful.
Yes, yeah. That is the only card that affects the warlord, unfortunately.
Oh well, that's great.
so-
Yeah, they definitely should have been better then.
Battle line, though. Battle line. We've got several cards that affect battle line. The first of these is prepared positions.
Yeah.
Okay, so in this whole game, your battle line units can access go to ground and heroic intervention for free. Okay, for free. You can't do it if you've already done it on someone else. You can't have multiple uses of it, but you can do it for free.
That's good.
I mean, there's a lot of powerful battle line units out there. Cover's great on them, provided they're infantry, of course. Heroic intervention is very good.
Yeah.
On battle line units. There's a lot of melee orientated battle line units. And even if they're not melee orientated, there's a lot of uses actually for just sticking people on objectives or trying to base enemy models to force them to hit you. I think that's a really good one. I'd love to see that in tournaments. What about you?
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm already seeing combos here. Maybe see Mephiston on the table. Anything with fight, like any way you get fights first in a battle line unit for a melee army is going to be great with this because heroic intervention on a fight first unit is such a deterrent against other melee armies. It's insane.
Yeah.
So really, I do like that. Whether we'll see it a lot in tournaments, I don't know.
Right, next we've got raised banners. Okay, so at the end of any turn, if there's a battle line unit within range of an objective marker that you control, your unit is said to have raised a banner. Okay, it's not an action though. You're just said to have raised a banner, and you get an extra victory point that counts towards your secondary score. Okay, you can't raise a banner on the same objective more than once in a game, but if you manage to get a battle line unit onto, let's say, 3 different objective markers, you can get 3 extra VPs.
And can your opponent interact with this, like taking it away from you?
No, not at all. It's kind of like you move onto a marker with a battle line unit, you get a point. That's kind of the deal.
Okay.
Your opponent can do the same thing back. There's not like but it is only 1 point in that immediate instance. You don't keep generating points from them every turn.
I still think no, because most missions will have 3 in no man's land. You're probably going to get 1 or 2 points from this in a game of 40k. I do think that this is nice because there's a lot of games where I've had where I'm missing 2 points or like 1 point on my secondaries, and it has impacted the game quite a bit. So potentially, and I'm not saying it's going to be massive for the game, but potentially this might be a nice little mission, like special objective.
Yeah, I agree. If your opponent does only have 4 characters and you've taken Assassinate, you can get a few extra points from this. So it's really nice. I'd like to see this one in play. We've got Rapid Escalation next. Okay, so this one allows both players to deploy battle line units that are in a strategic reserve in the first battle round. But they can only deploy up to 200 points worth of units in a Strike Force game. So it's 10% if you're playing any of the other sizes. However, there is a restriction. You will have to set up within 6 inches of a board edge, wholly within 6, and not in the enemy deployment zone. And of course, more than 9 inches horizontally. Because the wording says you must, any battle line units that have Deep Strike won't be able to use Deep Strike. if you're coming down turn 1 with this mission rule.
Okay, so that's a little balancing factor there to stop, like, obviously, like, a unit from Deep Strike in turn 1.
Yes, like demons, for example, all of their units have deep strike.
True.
You wouldn't be able to use it turn 1 with this mission rule in play.
Do you think that this is going to be a good little rule to have?
I don't know that the impact is huge.
No.
I think it's going to depend on where the terrain is, and there are some deployment cards where objectives are like within 6 inches of the edge of the board, so you could very early get a unit onto an objective.
Yeah.
But as I said, I don't think it's hugely.
A lot of the times, if you do that, though, you are putting your unit out in the open.
Yeah.
Because there's usually a firing lane for your opponent to get to, or you are obviously just getting closer to your opponent. So is it worth it in a lot of situations? Time will tell, right?
Time will tell, and some armies will have better battle line for it than others, and we'll just have to see. The next battle line affecting card is Stalwarts.
Okay.
So your battle line units in this battle are able to do an action and still shoot.
Okay.
They're also able to do an action whilst they're in engagement range of the enemy.
So big guns never tire in pistol.
Old big guns.
Yeah.
So, like, if you've got your intercessors, they can still shoot and do an action. If you've got your Khorne berserkers and they're stuck in combat, you can still action.
Well, they want to be stuck in combat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? So it's really nice to see that it affects both melee battle line units and shooting battle line units.
No, that's good. That's good to see the battle line are getting love in this mission pack.
Yeah. And that's not it. So we've got Swift Action next, which allows all your battle line units to do an action, even if they advanced or fell back.
So assault, old assault.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you think battle line will be in play a bit more this edition, with this new
mission
update?
pack? So the big thing here, I think, is there's no chilling reign. So we're not going to be. I think every mission will now have to have some form of second mission rule, right? So hopefully we will see some of these battle line ones come in play and actually see battle line in people's lists and encourage people to take a much more well-rounded list potentially.
Yes, yeah.
But
I think we at the studio have been advocates for actually the old sort of detachment styles where you have to take 2 battle line units in an army to make it work. And it's nice to see that kind of encouraged here. And if I were to write a mission pack, then I would definitely be including a lot of these battle line focused mission rules, because I think that they're really cool and they give some armies a way to compete a bit harder compared to others. Like Custodian Guard being battle lines crazy strong with some of these abilities. Space Marines, getting some of those detachments that actually have a battle line opened up for them, like the Company of Hunters, getting Outriders as battle line. Well,
now they can actually do all these abilities potentially in a game, which is interesting, right? Which one is your favourite, and which one are you most looking forward to see on the tabletop?
Of the battle line ones,
of any of the missions.
So there is one more.
Okay.
So we'll just quickly cover that one. So Smoke and Mirrors.
Yeah.
And this allows both players, after you've deployed, to essentially place up to 500 points of one unit in reserve, strategic reserve.
Okay, so you get effectively a redeploy on one unit.
Kind of, but it has to go in reserve.
Okay.
And it's strategic reserves. Because I'd love to see more battle line in the game, I'm going to go for prepared positions, where your battle line units can heroically intervene and go to ground for free.
Yeah.
I think that's very cool.
It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out with certain armies. Like you've mentioned Custodies, with their Custodian Guard getting... Because don't forget, characters attached into these units get battle line. So any of your strong characters now will obviously be able to heroic intervene for free. And some characters out there are one-man armies that can literally wipe out units for the fun of it. So
yeah,
I do think it's a very strong one.
I think Imperial Knights as well, like Armigers, Chaos Knights, of course, being battle line is going to open up doors for them as well. And of course, most battle line units are really high OC. So there's a lot of play around objectives, and that's the kind of thing I really like.
There's a lot of tactical finesse to it, right?
What about you?
So mine's actually adapt or die. I actually really like the idea of just being able to swap your fixed objective. For me, tactical, we'll go through this in depth in other videos, but tactical is obviously, for me, still the way forward with your armies. But that tempts me more with fixed, because I can actually potentially have just 3 in my mind of fixed objectives and go, I'm going to do these 3 fixed objectives this game. So I just need to make sure by the certain turn I do these certain ones. It just adds a bit more finesse to your fixed play.
Yeah, I agree. And if I see this for a mission, I'm probably going to go fixed, just because I have that flexibility in there.
Yeah. Next, though, Michael, we've got primary rules. So this is obviously the major changes to the mission pack. What have we got?
Okay, so this is how we score our primary points. Take and hold is still there. It hasn't changed.
Okay.
So 5 for each of your objectives to a maximum of 15. Okay, next we've got the ritual. So this is the one where you could set up objective markers. It hasn't really changed a lot. We've kind of included the actions thing. All of these cards now are much better laid out.
So much better laid out.
It's a lot easier to work out what's going on. So the actions are much clearer on the ritual. But the slight change is that when you set up those markers, they have to be set up 12 inches away, not 9 like it was previously, 12 inches away from another marker in no man's land.
Right, okay.
So there's less that you can set up across the board because of that increase in distance. And of course, with actions changing, you're going to be setting up less anyway.
Yeah, which means that I think this one's going to be a very difficult one to score primary on because it's going to be very difficult to set up, especially if your opponent's aware of where you're going to be setting things up, right?
Yeah, exactly. And of course, you only score for no man's land, so you really you need to set up turn 1 if you can. Next, we've got unexploded ordnance. This is kind of like the old football sort of game.
Okay.
So you kind of move objectives as an action. So in your shooting phase, if you're in range of an objective marker, you can do an action, and then at the end of the turn, you can move that objective marker 6 inches. And then at the end of your turn, you're going to score victory points based on how close those objective markers are to your opponent's deployment zone. We didn't see this one in its previous iteration much in tournaments. I don't think enough has changed to see it. It's a little bit complicated.
Right.
And the scoring is obviously end of turn. It's weird.
Yeah, it doesn't scream out like it's going to be a very fun mission for me, personally. I feel like you're just basically pushing objectives towards your opponent. I don't want to be doing that. I want to take the objectives with me. But yeah, I don't think we'll see this one much competitively.
Yeah, it's a bit complicated. Next, we've got linchpin. Okay, so if you control your deployment zone marker, then you're going to get 3 victory points for that marker and 5 for every other marker you control.
To a maximum of 10?
15.
15? Yeah. Okay, right, interesting.
If you control any markers but not your home marker, then you're only going to get 3 victory points for your objectives.
Right, so there is an importance here to holding your home objective to guarantee the 3 points every, obviously, turn, and then holding no man's land. So you're probably looking like 8 a turn, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you absolutely cannot take any chances with losing your home objective with this one, which I really like. It's very different to a lot of the cards we've had previously. Scorched Earth.
It's still here.
So it's still here. Obviously, it's had the whole actions rework. One big change, though, is that you score for each marker you've burnt in No Man's Land. Previously, it was if you burn any in No Man's Land, you just get 5 total.
Right.
Now, if you burn 3, you get 15.
Okay.
You also score it immediately after it's burned.
Right.
Okay,
not at the end of the battle.
Not the end of the battle, exactly. So you start burning the actions at the end of your opponent's next turn, rather than at the start of your next command phase. It's just a lot simpler now, but it's still I think a stalwart. It's going to be in tournaments.
Yeah, you don't want to be burning all the objectives though, because otherwise you have no other primary score. So
well, maybe you've got a secret mission in mind.
Oh, okay, maybe that might. All right, I see you, Mike. Now I'm on to you now. All right, what's the next one?
So we've got supply drop.
Yep.
Okay, this has not changed.
Brilliant, nice and easy.
At all. A lot of people in the tournament seem not a huge fan of this. I think there's some, maybe like the put a unit in strat reserve rule could pair well with this to try and make it a little bit funner.
Yeah.
Because you kind of get to redeploy based on where the objective is.
Yeah, sure.
It's randomly determined. But I still don't like how this mission works, personally.
Right, okay. So hopefully it's not a mission pack.
I would hope not. Everybody's favourite Purge the Foe is still here.
I love Purge the Foe.
There's one change, and that's that you don't get points for killing more units round 1.
Oh, thank God.
Which, bit of a balancer.
Yeah, that was it was a tough one, that one, because there were so many instances where that swung a game massively because you had that one unit which had to do an action or something and then boom, it's dead.
Yeah, 8 points for your opponent. So that's sorted now.
Nice, I like it.
We've got Burden of Trust. Okay. Burden of Trust. So you're going to score 4 victory points for each objective marker you control that's not in your deployment zone. And you're going to score that at the end of your command phase. Unless, of course, you're going second, it's the 5th battle round, and that's the case with a lot of these. After you've scored your victory points, you then choose a unit within range of that marker and they become essentially a guard unit. Okay. Now, at the end of your opponent's next turn, if that guard unit's still in range of the marker and you still control the marker, you get 2 extra victory points. And
Right.
you can do this per objective you control. So if for some reason you were able to control all 3 objectives across the middle, and you picked a guard for all 3 objectives, and your opponent basically stood and did nothing, then you would get 4 for each of those objective markers, and an additional 2 for each.
So that's a lot of points. I'm not
That's a
going
lot
to
of
do the
points.
math.
Yeah, a lot of points.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Interesting. So don't let people guard their objectives. Go and take the objectives off your opponent
Yeah.
and guard themselves.
Basically, yeah. Put a big target on them.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of cool intricate plays you can do with this, so I really hope this one turns up in tournaments.
Awesome.
So for Terraform, you're going to get 4 victory points for each objective marker that you control. In addition, you can do an action on objective markers that are not in your deployment zone. And that action is finished at the end of your opponent's next turn, so you have to survive their turn. Then you're going to score 2 victory points for each terraformed objective marker that you control.
Okay.
For the rest of the game.
Yeah, interesting.
So once you've terraformed it, you don't have to terraform it again.
Do you think we'll see that one competitively?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I think any mission that lets you do an action to score extra points is good for the game, because it kind of takes a little bit of heat out of the first few turns. There's less trying to just destroy your opponent's army and more trying to score points.
There's more tactical thought going into the game, right? Of actually, I need to reserve this unit to make sure I can keep doing this action, or I don't want to just get rid of all my assets because I'm not scoring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that is all of the new primary mission cards, and we've seen the mission rules as well. What do you think overall?
It does seem like a brand new game of 40k overall. There's a lot of good changes. So overall, I really like the inclusion of like battle line and things like that. That's probably my favourite change so far for this new mission pack. And there are some really nice actual mission rules. But what about you?
I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan. I think we've gotten rid of a lot of mission rules that just didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Which is why we were using Chilling Reign so much. We've also gotten rid of things like sweep and clear for making objectives yours until your opponent takes them, and that kind of makes you want to take units that have that as a rule. Yeah,
that kind of made a lot of armies obsolete, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of those units actually have the rule to have battle line rather. So your Orc Boys, your Cultists, your Intercessors. So actually you've got more reasons to take battle line because they have those rules. So I think that's quite nice, and I think they've gotten rid of a few missions that nobody really liked or played anyway, which I think it's all good for the game, and I can't wait to start playing some of these missions.
The final part of this video, Michael, secondary missions. So the decks which you're going to be using to score your precious secondary points. This has seen some incredible changes, like some major reworks and things, right?
Yes, it has, and 2 additional cards.
Yeah.
So we've got 18 cards now, and there's 9 fixed tactical objectives.
So half the deck.
Yeah, half the deck.
Yeah.
Half the deck. So let's start off with an easy one. Secure No Man's Land hasn't changed.
No.
Hasn't changed at all. Then we've got a new one, Containment. So you start this action wholly within 9 inches of a table edge and not within your deployment zone.
So it's forcing you outside of your deployment zone?
Yes. So certain cards have gone. This includes Investigate Signals. Capture Enemy Outposts is also gone, and you'll notice others because we won't mention them. But this is kind of like a revised version of Investigate Signals.
Yeah, rather than it being in the corners, it's now somewhere where it's actually relevant in the middle of the board.
Yes, yeah. So, but on a board edge. So you start this action. You can do it with up to 2 units, provided they're wholly within 9 of different board edges outside your DZ deployment zone. You get 3 victory points if you've done it with 1 unit, and you get 6 victory points if you've done it with 2, and it completes at the end of your turn. So it's kind of like an immediate, you score some points. On some missions, this is very easy.
Yeah.
Because the objective markers can allow you to hold them and still wholly be within 9 of the board edge.
Yeah. To be fair, I think one thing that's worth mentioning now is I think there's only 1 card in this deck that gives you extra points for taking tactical. Because before you would be like, oh, I'll take tactical, so I'm probably just going to get 1 extra point for doing this. Or, do you know what I mean? Like there was that extra incentive to take tactical, whereas you're not seeing that now, but you're getting like fixed point values for each card.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But it is important to know you can get 6 from just this 1 card.
Well, this is it. It's also very big if you do this on both sides.
It is, I would say, quite easy.
Yeah, very
easy. Of,
yeah.
If you set up right, because currently in 40k we're setting up to be able to do Investigate Signals. You can easily set up to be able to do this. You can even deep strike to do it. on two sides. So I think this is going to be one that you're kind of hoping to draw in the early stages.
It's also going to depend on terrain, though, right? Because if it means that the 9 inches means you're wholly, genuinely in no man's land, like where there's nothing holding you for terrain, it's kind of you getting rid of assets effectively.
Yes.
To do this secondary.
Yeah, 100%. So next we've got Marked for Death. Okay, so you draw this card, and then your opponent picks 3 of their units. Right now, you can score Marked for Death in either player's turn, but if any of those units, like just one of them, is either destroyed or leaves the table, then you get your 5 victory points.
This I think might be my favourite card in the deck. I'm not going to lie. I know we've probably got different opinions on this one, but I like this for the kind of the bluff you could do to your opponent and make them go, these are my 3 easiest to kill. Now you're not targeting my unit I want alive for the rest of this game.
Yeah, I like the fact there's a lot of nuance to it.
Yeah.
You can drag your opponent into a different place where they don't want to be, or you can set up your turn so that if they do draw that card, you've got 3 impossible units for them to try and kill.
Yeah.
Whether that's you've included in your list maybe some lone op characters that are going to sort of sit at the back, whether you've got an unattached leader just in case they draw this card. I think there's a lot of play here.
Definitely.
For this card. But it's also, a lot of the time, actually not that difficult.
There's going to be at least, like, out of those 3, there's got to be at least one unit you could try and kill, right? Unless it's 3 Catan, then good luck.
Yeah, good luck. Defense Stronghold.
Yep.
It's not changed.
Brilliant.
You still redraw and shuffle it if you get it turn 1. Storm Hostile Objective still here. Okay, and it's still fixed, but you can't score it turn 1. You can redraw and shuffle it if you get it turn 1. If you take it fixed, you still can't score it turn 1. So a bit of a shame that you can't do it turn 1, especially if you take it fixed. But if you've got like Adapt or Die, and you're good at taking objective markers, maybe you score your other points early, like Establish Locus, which we'll come to later.
Yeah.
And then you start scoring this one later on in the game. So
yeah, no, that's a really, really good card still, and it's nice to see that it's still in the deck.
Engage on all fronts.
Okay.
So this has changed.
Oh.
And it seems subtle, but it's actually huge. It's much easier now. So for the table quarters, what you need to do is be more than 6 inches away from the centre. So you can literally be on the other side of the line that separates the 2 quarters, and you can still score for those 2 quarters.
That's a lot easier now.
It's still only 2 points for 3 quarters, and 4 for all 4 quarters, but it's a lot easier to do.
Yep.
Another thing to mention is if you have less than 3 units, then you can actually redraw this one, and you can shuffle it. Sorry, you can discard it if you've got less than 3 units left.
Right, sure.
So Recover Assets is a brand new fixed mission. If you do draw it for tactical and you have less than 2 units on the table, you can actually discard it and redraw.
Okay.
Because it requires a minimum of 2 units.
Yeah.
Now, what this requires you to do is pick 2 or more units that are wholly within different areas of the battlefield, and those areas are your deployment zone, no man's land, and the enemy deployment zone.
And you've got to be wholly within one of those areas.
Yes, and a different one with each of your units.
Okay.
Okay. Then you do an action, and that action completes at the end of your opponent's next turn. So you've got to survive.
You got to survive, right?
Got to survive. However, you get 3 victory points each time you do it for the minimum of 2 zones. You get 6 victory points if you do manage to do it for 3 zones.
Yeah.
Which is the most you can score from a fixed mission in a single turn. So if you do manage to pull off or build into, lone operatives, having like a deep striker behind a building somewhere, you can't react to move though, remember, because that will stop the action.
Yes.
So this one's quite interesting, and I'm excited to see how it plays out in the tournament scene. Can you see yourself using this one maybe?
No, I'm not going to lie. Like I just being brutally honest, I think for my own armies, I don't think I have the assets to deal with this one very well. I feel like I'd be giving away too much to score these cards, because you telegraph to your opponent what you're doing. Or it's very easy for you, because your opponent gets to counter it by killing those units. You really do have to build into those lone ops, in my opinion. Otherwise, your repulsor just shoots your unit off the board and it dies.
Yeah.
It's going to be very terrain dependent. It's going to be there's a lot of parameters you have to tick before you start scoring this, and that's why for me I'm not taking it. But I can see play for it for other factions.
Yeah, behind enemy lines. So this is still fixed. Pairs well actually with Recover Assets.
Yeah.
So this one you can redraw if you draw it in the first battle round. finally.
Yes.
Finally.
Yeah.
So you can redraw it if you draw it in the first battle round. It gets shuffled back into your deck, so you could draw it later and score it.
But that's a nice little like subtle change there as well, is the fact that you're not discarding it. You can still score it again. You're just saying to yourself, I'm not doing it this turn.
Yes, and do check your cards because some of them have this when drawn effect. Read that immediately because some of them are discard and some of them are actually draw a new one and shuffle that one back in the deck. And they're all quite, it makes sense which ones are which. So behind enemy lines, pretty much unchanged other than that.
Brilliant.
Next, we've got area denial. This has had a big overhaul. So to score area denial for 3 points, you need to have one of your units within 3 of the center of the board, just within, and no enemy units within 3 of the center of the board. So there's no wholly within requirement. If you want to score the full 5, then you need to have one of your units still within 3 of the center, but no enemy units within 6 of the center. Yeah, if you've got big models in your army, they can score this now. Whereas previously, you know, if you had an Imperial Knight, you weren't going to fit him wholly within 6 inches of the center of the board.
No, he's a big boy.
You know, the requirements for wholly within 6 was a bit much sometimes.
Yeah.
So being within 3 is interesting. It also means that if you draw this on a mission where there's no terrain on the center objectives, you have to step out of a ruin to do it.
Right.
You can't just be on the other side of a wall wholly within 6. You have to be within 3 at the middle. So you're sacrificing an asset to score this point, rather than it being basically free for 5 victory points. Assassination. We've mentioned it already. It hasn't really changed.
No.
For fixed, it's each time a character model is destroyed. And then for tactical, it's 5 points. So it's 4 for fixed per character. 5 if you've destroyed one or more characters. But also if you've killed all characters at some point previously in the game, then you get 5 victory points.
I think this is the only card in the deck now which rewards you for taking tactical over the fixed objective, right?
Yes, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Cleanse.
Yeah.
So cleanse has obviously been clarified with the new action system. But the wording, the way that I've read it, suggests that you can now only cleanse one objective with one unit. There's no longer stringing out a unit onto 2 objectives and cleansing them. Whether that's 100% clear or not in the wording, we'll have to see. Maybe there'll be an FAQ. But the way I read it, you can only cleanse an objective with one unit.
Right.
Rather than spreading it out.
Which probably makes sense, right?
Yes. Yeah, it does. This is, of course, fixed for 2 victory points and 4 victory points, respectively. But for cleansed, it's still only 2 and 4. Previously, it was 3 for one objective, 5. It's now less points for tactical.
Yeah, which is a big change, actually, to be honest. It makes it a bit less good.
Yeah, doing one objective at 2 victory points, not great.
No.
But there you go.
But that's where raising the banners will come in handy. Yeah, definitely. Next one.
Time to deploy establish a locus. Okay.
Okay.
It doesn't make sense that Tyranids are deploying a teleport homer unless they want to feed the.
Maybe they just
Fine,
regurgitated a teleport homer where they ate the Terminators ones. They went and then that's how they got the
Recycling.
Recycling.
Yeah,
that's the Tyranids thing, right?
So established locus is the same as deploy a teleport homer, with one major change. Deploying it in the middle is now only worth 2 victory points.
Much less of an auto take for fixed now, right?
Yes, because when you're taking it for fixed, you could just take it and you'd be happy with 15 total secondary points from just putting it in the middle every time. Now you really need to be putting it in your opponent's deployment zone in order to get the most points out of it. And that is the same for tactical as well. It's 2 and 4 for tactical as well.
It's interesting now, right? I think there's a lot less rewarding cards now for doing such simple things on the battlefield.
Yeah, agreed. And I think it's going to lean into less sporadic score differences because you drew something bad. And I think that's kind of what they're taking out of the game with the whole redraw this here or discard this and redraw.
Yeah.
By taking that out of the game, I think it's going to really help. Sabotage. That's the next one. So this is all about terrain features. So you're going to do an action in a terrain feature that's not in your deployment zone. So not at all touching your deployment zone.
This is a weird one, right? Do you feel like we're going to have to start having bases on our terrain to be able to be wholly within the terrain feature?
Probably going to have some line in tournament packs that say when you're within a terrain feature.
Yeah.
So, the terrain we play on obviously has like footprints. The GW Open terrain also has footprints. But if you're playing with other terrain that maybe is just an L, or just a wall, then you're going to have to either say that touching it is within it, or within a certain distance is within it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. There's going to, potentially we're going to have to work around terrain. Terrain packs might have to be balanced to account for this as well.
Definitely.
But it's not fixed. Thankfully, it's just tactical, so it won't come up as much as could be a problem. So when you do this action, you score it. You finish the action at the end of your opponent's turn. So you do have to survive their entire turn.
Okay.
It's another one of those.
Yeah.
But you score 3 victory points if you do it in no man's land. If you manage to do it to an opponent's terrain piece in their deployment zone, you get 6 victory points.
And do we remove the terrain piece when we sabotaged it? Damn it. I wanted to blow up their terrain pieces or something. Just strap a melter charge to a building.
You just remove terrain from no man's land. You're like, now I'm going to shoot you.
Yeah, no, I've got you. No, okay. Well, still, it's
You could house rule it.
you can house rule it. You pick up the terrain piece. Well, to be fair, look, in all seriousness, it's still a good secondary, I feel. And it's nice to see it actually terrain have an interactive feature in 40k.
Yeah, I like that there are cards here that your opponent has the opportunity to try and stop you scoring.
That's another big thing,
A
right?
bit more of that, right?
Yeah.
Because previously it was just like, I draw 2 cards, cool, I'll just write your score down now. Whereas now it's, I draw 2 cards, oh God, I have to survive your turn. So do I even try and do the card, or do I draw a new one?
It's going to be interesting, right? Because does that mean we move away from the MSU builds and we go into more of these tar pit units that are going to be like... Maybe that's going to be a change in 40k.
Maybe a bit. You're going to have to look at a proper mix now.
Yeah.
Like, I will take Terminators. I will take Deathwing Terminators and sit on an objective because I might want them to blow up a terrain piece. Whereas you might still go, okay, but I'm still going to take Scouts because I need to be able to get behind enemy lines.
Definitely,
and so on.
definitely.
So it's definitely going to change list building. Right, I've got 2 quick ones. Overwhelming Force and No Prisoners have not changed.
Brilliant.
Okay, not changed at all. Overwhelming Force is still 3 and 5, and No Prisoners still 2, 4, and 5. Bring it down. Big change.
The biggest change in the mission pack, I'd say.
So Tau Empire, rejoice.
Yeah.
Dread Mob, rejoice.
Yay!
So this is now awarded on a unit basis.
Yeah.
Rather than a model basis. So this is fixed, of course. If you do draw this in a game, if there's no eligible targets for it, monsters and vehicles, then you discard it and redraw a new card. Okay, so you don't have to just suck it up and still bring it down in your hand.
Yeah.
So it's 2 victory points for destroying a monster or vehicle unit. 2. Okay, it's +2 if that unit has a starting strength wounds of 15+, and then it's plus another 2 if it's a starting strength wounds of 20+.
So the key thing I've taken from this is you're effectively cutting the points you were scoring from a unit in half. Because now we're going to get, 6 points for a crisis unit, potentially?
Yeah, potentially.
Or
if we look at Killer Cans.
Let's look at Killer Cans, yeah. So in Leviathan, we're actually going to be getting 12 points for a unit of 6 Killer Cans.
Okay, yep, that's a lot.
Yeah.
What do we get with this, though?
So with this one, we're getting 6.
Yeah.
Because it's a unit of 20 plus wounds. So we're going to be getting 6 points for all the parameters that we've just reached here.
Yeah.
Which is massive. Like, it genuinely helps these vehicle-heavy armies. Even though, do we want to be helping vehicle-heavy armies, Mike?
Let's not...
But I think what this is going to encourage is it means that as a tower player, as any of these armies, Imperial Knights, for instance, it's not as horrific to lose these big or take these big units or taking an army of crisis suits. You can do that now. You're still giving up a lot of points.
Yeah.
But you're not giving up, like, after 2 units die, your entire opponent's worth of, like, bring it down points.
No, it is absolutely huge. When you're looking at your crisis units as well, you can start to think about how shield drones manipulate the amount of wounds at starting strength, and also how your characters that are leading you manipulate your starting strength wounds. So there's a lot of play for Tau to try and stop it from scoring too many points on Bring It Down. I also think it's very interesting that 2 victory points is the most you're going to get from any vehicle that is 10 to 14 wounds. Because previously that's always been 3 points.
Yeah.
So Rhinos now are only worth 2 points each. Most battle tanks are only worth 2 points each.
Yeah, Predators, things like that.
Armigers, they're only worth 2 points each now for Bring It Down. So, maybe vehicles got a bit much of a buff. We'll see.
So the big thing with this, though, I'm taking is why I think that the new objective, this mission rule, that gives you a third card for your fixed objectives, why that will be so important, I think, for a mission pack.
Yeah.
Just because of things like this is, even if I go into one of these armies, I can't guarantee you've basically got to table them to get these points, right? Overall, for the points costs. Whereas now actually being able to like kill a big chunk of them and go, right, I'm going to swap it now to something else. Which is why I think that that's going to be a very cool little mission rule if it does get put in mission packs.
Yeah, agreed. So bring it down, big change. I think it's much more workable and it's better for the game. But remember, you don't score any points until the entire unit's destroyed.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not on a per vehicle or model basis anymore. And finally, card 18.
Card 18.
Cull the Horde. A new fixed one. So this one's been introduced, I think, as a measure to account for Horde armies that don't give up anything on fixed. Now there's an option for them, okay? So this only works against infantry targets, but each time you destroy a infantry unit that has a starting strength of 20 or more models, you're going to get 5 points. Alternatively, each time you kill a infantry unit with a starting strength of wounds of 25 or more wounds, you're going to get 5 victory points.
The last bit is interesting. And I think this is where we're probably going to see, because now that impacts a unit, you're rarely seeing it, right? But a unit of 10 Terminators gives up this point.
Yes, but what is important, a distinction to make, is that leaders that are attached to those units won't count towards the wounds.
Okay.
Or the models.
Right.
So if you had, let's say, 10 Space Marines and 2 characters attached to them, or even 1 captain, because he's got 5 wounds, that wouldn't trigger this.
Right, sure.
Which, as you say, is one of the reasons why this doesn't, you won't see it as much. And I think 25 plus wounds is probably too much of a...
So I do think that potentially maybe if they changed it to 20 plus wounds.
Agreed.
That would have been a bit more impactful, because now we would see a Space Marine squad of 10 give up this secondary. Whereas we're not going to see very many infantry units give up 25 points, or 25 wounds, sorry, for 5 points.
Yeah.
Obviously, it does mean that if you do chip damage to these units over time, and let's say you took that unit of boys down to 3 models, but then in 2 turns later you end up finishing it off, you will score the secondary if you draw it, because you've killed a unit at starting strength with that wall.
Also, when you draw this card, if there isn't a target that fulfills either of these, you can discard it and redraw a new card.
Okay, so the same thing we've been seeing throughout this mission.
Same as Bring It Down, essentially. But I think either 20 plus wounds would have been great, or include the leaders.
Yeah, including leaders would have been a big...
Because then you can go, actually, I'm not going to put the leader in this unit, because I don't want to give you Cull Horde. Because the most common units we'll see that have 20 plus wounds, if you include the leader, is 25 plus wounds is like the 10-man Space Marine squad, which we don't really see anyway.
Yeah.
But things like 6 Blade Guard, 6 aggressors with a character attached, that would then sort of exceed the wound count. But as it stands, just works against a few different targets. But it's nice to have, I suppose, against Green Tide, against Endless Swarm, Horde, NIDS. It's
Crew.
nice to have. Crew against Crew, of course.
Yeah.
It's nice to have.
Yeah, definitely. We did have a secret at the end of this, though, Mike.
Yeah, that wasn't the final bit.
That wasn't the final bit. We've got secret missions. Okay, so what is the first secret mission we've got?
First secret mission is Command Insertion, all right? So this one's all about the Warlord. So at the end of the battle, if your Warlord is within range of 1 or more objective markers in your opponent's deployment zone that you control, you're going to get 20 victory points.
Yeah, this is... it's actually not as hard. It's probably just basically capture enemy outpost, right?
It's basically capture any outpost with your Warlord by the end of the game.
Most armies were capturing their opponent's outpost with their Warlord.
If they're already winning, yeah. So it's an interesting dynamic, right? Because some people's Warlords will not be able to do this.
Yeah.
So you just don't pick it, right? But it also makes it obvious to your opponent that you won't be picking it.
Yeah.
Having a mobile Warlord means you might have picked it. Dante might be going for your home objective. And to be honest, every time I've seen you play, that's exactly what Dante does. So this looks like a good choice for you.
Oh, I can't
case you
wait.
need it.
I'm basically just going to be playing with all my opponent's minds because they all know I'm going for their home objective, whether I've got this or not.
So, this is going to be really useful for any ways that you've got to leave the board and come back on. Hypercrypt having a chronomancer that does the extra move after you've shot as your warlord is disgusting, because you can just deep strike 3 inches away, shoot, and then move on to the objective.
Yeah.
If you go second, you could easily nearly guarantee this. Shatter Cohesion is our second one. Okay, so at the end of the battle, if there's no units from your opponent's army on the battlefield, you get 20 victory points.
So you get 20 victory points for tabling your opponent from a losing position.
Yes. So this is where this comes in, is if your opponent's playing something like, let's say, Green Tide, and they cover the board in boys, and you have the firepower to actually deal with them, you just don't get any points for your primary objectives.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So by the end of the game, you've tabled them, and you've maybe got a few primary points, obviously capped at 20 because you've taken a secret mission. Now you can get 20 to catch up on the primary that you missed out because they were sort of pushing you into your deployment zone.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that's kind of why this is a secret mission.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you pick this and you know you're going to table your opponent, but you don't think you're going to score primary points in the latter half of the game, then it could be a good bet.
Yeah, definitely. And there is a little caveat at the end there, isn't there? We're saying that every unit from your opponent, like basically if you table your opponent, or if your opponent basically has units that are battle shots, units below half strength, or more than 3 inches away from all objective markers, right? You're still going to get 20.
Yes. So if all the units from your opponent's army are either battle shocked, below half strength, or more than 3 away from any objective markers, you also get the 20 points.
Yeah.
Which is very cool. And I'm looking forward to Dread Talons battle shocking every enemy unit.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
This one's difficult to bluff because you're going to be trying to destroy your opponent's units anyway.
Yeah.
So they could just pull this out and then suddenly you've lost the game. So,
oh no, my opponent's trying to table me.
Yeah. Like, I can tell your tactic.
Yeah, it's not very secret, this one, is it? Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I can imagine you actually playing a game and you have the Warlord secret objective, but you actually don't hide it. You're like, boom, I'm doing this. What are you going to do about it?
Just have a sniper in it. Just snipe Dante out, and I'm like, no!
Dante's coming for your home objective.
He is.
And you better try and stop him. Unbroken Wall. That's the next one. Very cool. So at the end of the battle, you get 20 victory points if you control 3 or more objective markers that are not in your deployment zone.
So you control the mid-board, or... this will be really good if you're going second. Like, if you're going second, this is actually a very achievable one to do, as long as you've got the models on the board.
Yeah, agreed. And actually, with the way that a lot of the primary works, you might even reach that 20 cap in that final turn with, holding 3 objectives for 15 points on take and hold. So you could get here 35 points going second. Not a fan, personally, of the fact that it's so easy going second, but I can understand why this is in here. Because if you do get pushed into your deployment zone, again, it's kind of like the tabling one. Yeah. But maybe you're not able to table them. At least you can destroy their units enough that you can take the 3 objectives in the middle, and then you catch up on primary points later.
The final one, War of Attrition. What's different from this from actually killing your opponent?
So, if at the end of the battle, 1 or more of your battle line units from your army are within your opponent's deployment zone, just within, not wholly within, and any one of the following conditions applies. There are no battle line units from your opponent's army on the battlefield, or every battle line unit from your opponent's army that is on the battlefield is in your opponent's deployment zone.
Okay, so you either just push your opponent's battle line back to their deployment zone or kill them all.
Yes. This is very cool, and actually, both of us having played Age of Sigmar is very much like an Age of Sigmar grand strategy, which is kind of like
it definitely
you kill all the battle line.
Yeah.
So this, if you've got a lot of battle line units, and this is a reason to run potentially more battle line units, in addition to, of course, the mission rules, this could be a sleeper.
It's definitely going to reward like those armies, like the Ravenwing army, actually, because of the wound threshold that army brings with all those battle line outrider units. It's going to be a bit more tough now to get this one for that.
Countering this is going to be tough for a lot of those meta armies because they don't bring battle line.
Yeah.
So this is an easy win if you get a single one of your battle line units into the enemy deployment zone by the end of the game.
Yeah.
And you could hold them in a transport for as long as possible and wait for that last turn. This is very interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Very interesting.
So if I'm playing Hypercrypt, I take Immortals.
Yep, they are battle line.
Put them into Deep Strike turn 1.
Yep.
I don't bring them down till turn 5. Do I win the game?
If you bring them down in the deployment zone, turn 5, yeah, you do. Grey Knights as well. You could do the same thing with like strike squads. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. I don't know if there's any battle line units. Demons.
Yes.
Because demons have the ability to jump up in the sky and drop down.
3-inch deep strikes.
Gargoyles in Vanguard. They're battle line. So take them off the board, bring them back down. There's a lot of interesting play for this secret mission.
Yeah, it's going to be... Suddenly those deep strike denials... I mean, they were already really good, but now they're kind of like essential.
So do you think secret missions actually will affect the game?
100%. I'm going out on a... I'm genuinely happy to say that I do think the secret missions will be seen competitively because they are achievable. Like, they are not impossible at all. Like, genuinely, like that last one, we just demonstrated one way of a competitive list, being able to take advantage of that. Like, there's ways to make these work really well. Yeah, I do think we'll see them. What about you?
I think we will definitely see them, and I actually think they're going to be more popular than we might initially think. I could see easily 50% of games actually having a secret mission played in them, and I can see top players, and this is something we'd probably end up covering in like the masterclass and coaching calls and stuff, actually trying not to be ahead of your opponent on primary by the end of battle round 3 against certain opponents. Because if you do that against Hypercrypt, they are doing a secret mission.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a world in which they don't. So you kind of... And there were missions in, funnily enough, Age of Sigmar, which had the same kind of thing, where you tried to not be in the lead in order to avoid a mission rule going against you.
Yeah.
So here we've got the same kind of thing, and I love it. I think it's great. Really dynamic.
Definitely. It changes the game completely. We've gone through the entire mission pack now. What are your overall thoughts for this mission pack, and how do you think this is going to impact 40k massively?
Hugely. It's going to affect list writing. It's going to affect people's strategies on the table that don't just involve moving models around. There's a lot of thinking to this. There's bluffs. There's also planning to not score as many points as you normally would. There's a huge amount going on here. And it feels very much, as you said right at the beginning, like a 10.1 edition, right? It's the next step in this edition, and it's changed a huge amount.
Positive changes?
I think so. I think we were all waiting for a more fun, more dynamic game system.
Tactical game system as well.
And tactical game system, right? There's a lot of thought process going on. What about you?
I'm very excited for it. I felt like for a long time, I've loved 10th edition so far. Obviously there's things that have needed to change and things like that, but it has been a very positive experience for me. But I do think that this mission pack is going to bring so much more excitement to the game, which I've been rearing for the entire edition, actually, well, for like the past 6 months of Leviathan mission pack. So it's nice to see these changes.
Right, I've got a question for you, Jordan. Are you going to be putting at least 2 units of battle line in every list?
Maybe. I feel like I need to. Like, I definitely feel like I have to put them in, but I don't want to, because then, like, it depends. Like, I think Assault Intercessors for me as a Space Marine player are a fantastic choice. Especially in Sons of Sanguinius. I think certain armies are loving the change for battle line because their battle line are amazing. Most armies were actually taking a decent amount of battle line. Death Guard were taking Plague Marines. Knights had to take battle line because they only had like 2 data sheets. There's the only armies I think it'll impact more would be like Eldar, because they don't normally take Guardians. Now you have to effectively, right? Because otherwise your opponent has some big advantages going into certain missions. So yeah, what about you?
100%. Yeah, 100%. Fortunately, I do play armies where things like Legionaries, obviously already a very good battle line unit. But even in things like Salamanders, I now will have to look at having some battle line units in there, if only to avoid my opponent scoring a secret mission. About battle line units. So yes, 100%. I'll be putting battle line in every list.
Yeah. Well, let us know at home if you're going to be putting more battle line in your list. How do you feel about this mission pack? Are you excited for the changes? Are you happy with the changes? And how is it impacting your list building? Because I think that's a massive topic of discussion to be had with this mission pack. But Michael, thank you for going through this with me. Guys at home, thank you so much for watching the video. And don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. And we'll see you in a video very soon.
Now, if you do want to know a bit more about how this impacts your individual faction, we will be doing a whole module based on the recent updates to 40k and how they affect individual factions on the Masterclass series. And you can subscribe to that through the links below.